أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Before we start today's event, let us send blessings on the Messenger of Allah, Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, with the loudest of your voices.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Firstly, I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming to today's event with the title of The Scientific Manifestations from the Holy Quran and the Life of the Ahlulbayt. We have been given the honor of having Shaikh Mirza Abbas present with us here today, who will enlighten us more about this topic. But before I call upon Shaikh Mirza, I would like to invite Brother Hasnain Lalji to bless this event with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Can you please welcome? Can you please welcome him with the loud salawat?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. And a sign for them is the dead earth. We have brought it to life and brought forth it from it grain, and from it they eat. And we placed therein gardens of palm trees and grapevines, and caused to burst forth therefrom some springs, that they may eat of his fruit. And their hands have not produced it, so will they not then be grateful? Exalted is he who created all pears from what the earth grows, and from themselves, and from that which they do not know. And a sign for them is the night. We remove from it the light of day, so they are left in darkness. And the sun runs on course towards its stopping point. That's the determination of the exalted in might, the knowing. And the moon we have determined for its phases until it returns, appearing like the old date stalk. It is not allowable for the sun to reach the moon, nor does the night overtake the day, but each in an orbit is swimming. And a sign for them is that we carried their forefathers in a laden ship, and we created for them from the likes of it that which they ride. And if we should will, we could drown them, then no one responding to a cry would there be for them, nor would they be saved, except as a mercy from us and provision for a time. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim.
Ahsan, Hassan, thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. Can we please recite another loud salawat, please?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
There's no effort of salawat from the ladies, so please can we have another loud salawat?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
Ahsan. Okay, before I pass the mic over to Shaikh Mirza, I'd like to get you guys up to date with what he has achieved in his lifetime. So Shaikh Mirza Abbas was born in India, and at the age of 2 he migrated to the US. He then acquired his associates from the Evergreen Valley College in San Jose, California. He then went to Qum to study for his seminarial education. He studied there for 11 years, after which he came to Birmingham and became a resident at the KSIMC Jamaat. He then went to study at the University of Birmingham, where he acquired his MA in Islamic Studies. And at present, he is a resident at the Jamaat of Nottingham and a candidate for doctoral research at the University of Exeter in the field of mysticism and philosophy. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Shaikh Mirza, who will enlighten us more about this topic. Inshallah, question and answers will follow after the lecture. So can we recite a loud salawat?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا حبيبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين سيما بقية الله الأعظم بقية الله خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين ولعنة دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد قال الله تعالى في محكم الكتاب المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذي أنزل الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشاء منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تعويله وما يعلم تعويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم. صدق الله العظيم. I recited the verse number 7 from the chapter of Al Imran, which talks about that we have sent you the book, هو الذي أنزل الكتاب منه, and in which you have verses which are muhkamat, which are apparent verses, and it also have mutashabihat, which means that are verses which have forms to it, or as one would say, anthropomorphic verses. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ. However, there are people who have a bit of disease within them, and they interpret this in accordance to their wishes, and the interpretation of it, which creates fitna, which creates differentiation. وَمَا يَعْلَمُونَ تَعْوِيلَهُ, and they are not aware of the interpretation of it, إِلَّا اللَّهِ, except that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, except that those people of knowledge. So the Quran is talking about Allah have the knowledge of what is in the Quran, and on the second level it's also recognizing and saying that people of knowledge, those who are the Ahl Zikr, people of knowledge, they have that. And at the same time, in another verse, we tend to find that Quran says that ask the people of Zikr, people of knowledge, and they will be the one who would basically give the true meaning of the Quran. So as the topics of the signs and the manifestation of Islam and the manifestation of Quran and the traditions of the Ahlulbayt and the companions within the modern science. So first thing is, basically I'm trying to point out the reference place of that. The reference for our investigation is Quran, and the reference for our investigation is the traditions of the Prophet, the Sunnah, as we say. So as the topic is about science, you will be quite amazed that I will not be here pointing out to the specific discoveries or inventions that we tend to find within the modern science, and kind of say that, see, mashallah, Quran have talked about it. Quran have talked about it, and see, Quran is saying the same thing which these modern sciences are saying. Or I'm going to point out to what compare like the computer to the mind, and God talks about it in the Quran or something like that. I'm here to relay a message, and that message is the message of Islam, based upon the principles of the Quran and on the Sunnah. And if you get that message, which is really a hardcore principle of our belief and faith, I have done and I have paid my dues. Okay, now let's start or begin discussing about the modern science with the discussion that was, you might have seen on the internet. It was circulated, and if you guys were in London last year, there was an exhibition upon in London in relation to the 1001 inventions by Muslim scientists. There was an exhibition in London, and there was an article in CNN as well. Even if you now Google it, go CNN stroke 1001 invention. Salim Hassani, he is the chair of the Foundation for the Science and Technology and Civilization. He published an article on CNN last year, and this article kind of points out to 10 inventions. However, there are 1001. It was exhibited in the museum. But in this 10 invention, he talks about how Muslim scientists have contributed to the modern science, basically. And what we have of today in relation to that gap between the Renaissance and the Greek sort of sciences, because the Western world say that we are really indebted to the Greeks, and but however there was a dark age which they themselves recognize it, that nobody really discusses much about. The dark age, which was actually the age of flourishing for Muslims, and it was an age of advancement in development and technology, as they were stuck in the dark ages. And here is the puzzle where in this article you could find, where he points out to that it was really Muslim scientists who the Western sort of modern technology or the discoveries or the inventions they are indebted to, such as, for instance, he talk about surgery, where he gives specifically points out to the references, where he says that it was about 1,000 years ago, Al-Zahrawi, it was the first surgeon who kind of published about 1,500 pages, like a book in which he talks about surgery, operations. And as a matter of fact, he was known to be the first individual to do the cesarean operation. So therefore, see, it's Muslims, oh wow, mashallah, very good. Then you talked about the flying machine. There was Abbas ibn Farnas, who was basically the first one who tried to fly through an aircraft, and which is known to be the flying machine. And he leaped up and he flew for certain feet, and then he fell down and almost broke his back. So even before Da Vinci, for instance, as we see that they are the one who are known to be the inventors of this concept of flying in the flying machine and all that, or the Wright brothers, as we read in the Western academia. But way before that, we find Abbas trying and doing that. And if you look at the old calculation and the pictures, that you would find that literally the same fashion how the Wright brothers have tried to build. He has done the same work, and they were really inspired from him to carry on the legacy. So once again, we tend to find that really it's Muslims who Like for example, then you look at the contribution of Ibn Haytham in optics, where he really rejects or the concept or the theory of Uselit. That was that the light is emitted from the eye itself to outside, and then it is being able to see. However, Ibn Haytham says that no, light is out there, it goes inside, and then it is reflected through the eye, and one is able to realize or see things. And this is that technology used in the modern day-to-day in these cameras that we find. So it's really Ibn Haytham, for instance, we find that Muslim scholar who about 1,000 years ago who brought this new theory and invention, and which today in reality roots back or goes back to the discovery of him. Or if we go on further discussing, for instance, we find the name itself, which we all know. I mean, this is nothing but a reminder. You might have heard this before as well. Algebra, the mathematics that we have, which comes from Jabir ibn Hayyan. Jabir, who was renowned sort of philosopher. You would find treatises in relation to mathematics and other philosophical issues as well, where we see, for instance, he was the one who invented algebra, and it comes from that very name. Or chemistry. Chemistry was indeed a science which comes from the root word of alchemy. Alchemy, chemia, where it is to change the sand to gold. It was really a journey, or how shall I say, a conquest of Muslim scholars investigating that how can the transformation of this sand to gold takes place. And they have really reached high ranks in order to do that. Once again, we find that it is that Muslim contribution. Okay, now we find that so much of being contributed. I mean, I haven't really mentioned, for instance, you have the discussion where the most famous tape or the video or the documentary, which you all might have already seen, the Quran, the Bible and Science, Maurice Bukai, who talks about how Quran is really in harmony to this modern science that it is, where it talks about evolution, where it talks about Big Bang and all of that. And indeed, Quran doesn't deny evolution. Indeed, Quran doesn't deny Big Bang as such. However, Quran doesn't establishes it, meaning that it says that yes, this is how it is, because Quran is not really a scientific book as such. And on the other hand, if one does that, which the scholars have tried to, doing that, meaning that they have said that okay, Quran have mentioned this, this is how Big Bang or the evolution have taken place. So therefore, the theory of Darwin is correct, because the Quran have mentioned that. So therefore, we find that today Darwin is rejected, or his theory is rejected. Now then, they would turn to the Quran and say that, see, your Quran have talked about evolution, now it's rejected, the Quran is a book of no value. So that danger is there, and that could be perhaps one of the reasons that we don't really find that specifically mentioning, and it's really, how shall I say, it's not really wise, or where one kind of establishes the modern discoveries and the modern theories that exist on the basis that yes, this is what it is mentioned in the Quran, because these theories are eventually rejected and criticized in the modern world and in the future as well. Anyway, now going back to what I was saying, that okay, we have all of that being manifested out from the Muslim scholars, from the Quran and from the scientists. But where lies the difference between the modern science that we see today and that traditional science, or science of the Quran and the Sunnah? I mean, this is for sure that what we see today of the modern technology and the modern science and the impact of that it has onto our day-to-day life, this requires a very deep and thorough investigation. It is very important because we are living, in this modern time, and day and night we are dealing with these things, these modern, whether that be technology or whether that be in the field of medicine. So, can we say this? Can we say this, that the modern science of today is really indebted to Islamic science, and it is really because of Islam that we see, it is because of the Quran that we see that Quran that the science have advanced? Can we say that? Can we really say that Islam, this is where Islam wanted the science to reach? This has reached to the, today as we have this all discoveries and all that. This is what Quran really wanted. This is what the Sunnah really were pointing towards. Seek knowledge, even if it be to China. See, and knowledge is good, and let's keep on seeking and discovering and giving benefit to the humanity and to insaniya, for instance. So, what do you have to say to that? Anybody, or shall I?
Basically, Quran has talked about scientific concepts, and again, if we look at today's world, because science sometimes proposes a certain thing and the next day it rejects it. So the Quran has talked about science, but the world has not yet reached to the full capacity which the Quran is talking about as in science. There are some concepts in the Quran which are scientific, but they are still not yet known. They are not still discovered.
Right. But what I'm saying is that today, for example, when we look at this camera here, or when we look at the computer, when we look at, for instance, medicine in the medical field, and people trying to really try to find out a vaccine for the cancer. Obviously, it as we were talking earlier, on that outward level, one would say that yes, it's really those Islamic science and discoveries in relation to advancing in space, where one is really indebted to the astrology that was, the treaties that come about, that comes from the Muslim scientists and scholars. So what I'm saying is that today, in terms of where we have reached scientific advancement, Islam would have been on the same level, these Muslim scholars, if they would have advanced in this fashion today. Because we tend to find many scholars, even Muslim scholars, praising Western science and the advancement and the progress and development in the West that we see. But at the same time, they are critical about the culture, about the values, about all of that system. There's a great mistake here. And anybody who can help me?
I think what we have seen from Europe is that what they did was they separated the church from the government. So even the modern world keeps religion to one side, right, and the world, business, science, etc. on another side. Right. Whereas what Islam says that we have everything.
Right.
So in that, I wouldn't say Islam, but actually the world has left Islam out on a certain level.
Right. Right. I think that's a valid point. That really makes that very basis. The issue of secularism, as we find, where there's a separation of church and state. That's where it lies. It started in the 17th century, right? which is the Renaissance, which they call it the New Age. And it was really here where it was manifested in that physical and in that physical realm. However, it started before that on that philosophical level, on discussions in relation to philosophy, where you have Descartes, you have scholars were emphasized upon, or the philosophers emphasized upon rationalism, upon rationality, rather than intellectuality. It started there and eventually ended up where there was a complete divorce from the revelation. The modern science, they completely separated themselves from the Quran, from Islam, or from Bible, for instance. Galileo, for instance, if you find that his theory about sun being the center of the earth and other planets and all that, which is rejected with the biblical cosmology. So here is Galileo discovering that, and Copernicus, all of these people, scientists who are speaking against the religion, what the theories and what the church is trying to teach them. So we find that the modern science, they have completely divorced, they have taken divorce from the revelation, from whatsoever that may be, maybe the Old Testament or the New Testament or the Quran or whatever. But within the Islamic sciences, where there was this advancement, there was this aspect of the divine. The divinity was at the center, and all of that, the other activity that we find is basically circumventing, or it's around that. A Muslim scientist, when he discovers something like a new star or something, he would say Alhamdulillah, rather than he would like to look at from a mathematical or quantitative aspect, how far it is, how many light years away it is. The question of God was completely gone. It never, and it happened there. So imagine how can that be today? How can that remain today? These scientists are not to be blamed. The universities are not to be blamed. Where there isn't any space for divine sciences completely. But rather in an Islamic world, in Islamic sciences, or within the Islamic cosmos, you would find even that be a mathematics. You have that, what you call the methodology in which God is placed at the center. The other aspect that we find, is where we tend to see that there were a lot of assumptions of things. They assume things. For instance, if you look at it, they would say that this is how when they carry out an experiment, and they carry out 10 experiments. After that, they say, okay, on that basis, we assume that that's how it's supposed to be growing, the cells or whatever, right? They are doing an experiment on perhaps looking at what is the development of or a reaction, when two different bodies are put together on a specific ground. Then they carry out, and after 10 experiments, they say that this is supposed to be. But after 15 years, we find a completely new sort of change taking place. So they have assumed it. There's assumption there. There's no specificity there. They are not specific. And when you question that the modern science, that why it happened, they said, it just happens sometimes. It just there's no specific answer. There's a lot of assumption here, An assumption, yes, assumption based on logic, they do base it on logic. The fourth thing which we said is based on logic. Why do I say that? Is because it's very practical. It's very pragmatic. If they have discovered something, in the course of 10 years or 15 years, and this is how it's supposed to be, then it makes sense. It's very logical. Very rational. Rationality is the foundation of modern science, where this rationality is really different from the intellectuality. Intellectuality where we talk about divine concepts, where we talk about man being connected to higher realms, such as not God, yes, that's the ultimate, but even the angelic realm, even the unseen world, where this unseen world have an effect upon this physical world. So I mean that is very important when it comes to modern science, and we should never be of a trap by boasting or by saying that, oh, see, it's really Islamic. Islam says that as well. But unfortunately, the modern culture that we see, the values, the deterioration in the modern values, in the cultural values that we have, is why? Is because of this. The modern technology, the modern sciences have really taken us away from the divine, from God, from higher realms. And as it has taken away, and when we are using them, when we are utilizing them, when we are praising them, when it's left and right with us, we are living, sleeping and getting up with that, then this have its effect upon our psyche, upon our understanding, upon our mentality. That's what is happening. So, if we are praising the modern development and the modern sciences and criticizing the Western culture and the Western values, breaking families and this and, then we are making, we haven't really understood the whole story, why it's happening. We criticize haste, for instance, but in this very modern world, haste is the major driving force behind every issue, whether that be buying something, selling something, whether that be cure of diseases. But at the same time, from an Islamic point of view, we tend to say that, as it's a famous saying that haste is a work of evil. That's like, because when one really hastes, one tends to miss out on many things. It's not done properly. There's so much things that one really misses out. So, but today the driving force behind that is that, yes, haste, but in relation to when we talk about call for prayers, we say, yes, come and join for prayer. Haste towards God rather than not haste away from God, or haste towards something that is very, like as we see, in computers or buying and towards materiality. So this is what the message really I wanted to relate to you, brothers and sisters here, and who are excelling in terms of in different fields of modern sciences and modern technology. That keep this in mind, that Islam is not against progress and development, but rather Islam really focuses upon that how and where this progress and development will lead you to. Today, modern man is sort of trapped. There's no other choice but what we see today. But the point is, to be aware of being trapped is of a greater of value than being blindly trapped as such. So now I will go back onto the topic that we were discussing, for instance, the Quran and the contribution of the Quran in that traditional sense, but not in this modern sense that we see today, is that, for instance, you would find certain elements where even the modern science have lacked their answers or contribution. Like, for example, miracles to begin with. That we don't really see that in that scientific world taking place. But from a very Islamic scientific point of view, one would say that one would see, or one is able to say, that the possibility exists that a very unique or a metaphysical sort of change that takes place and gives cures to people, and there's explainable by science. That's on the highest level that we see. That is really a true science, and how that is happening. The point is, what is the method? Then we look at recitation of the Quran, practices of your faith, protecting oneself, or when we get into the Sufi practices, chanting of certain azkar, things like that we tend to see. Or on a more superficial level, then you have the element where utilization of white magic, so on and so forth. That is really scientific as such, because Islamic science is always connected to the unseen world, whether that be a jinnah, whether that be spirits, whether that be angels, and higher indeed is God. On that very first level. Then on that second level, when we start to get into trying to find out or discover or investigate the physical discoveries as such, we find once again Quran talking about it was everything in Surah Dukhan, as we read, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ وَهِيَ دُخَانٌ فَقَالَ لَهَا لِلْأَرْضِ. As it says that, God turned to the heaven when it was smoke, and said to it and to the earth. A concept which we tend to see that, the issue where even the modern scientists have talked about a gas, and then eventually this gas turning into solids gradually and gradually. All of these planets and how they become. So we see these elements where very vaguely, Quran points out to. Like the brother, how beautifully he was reciting about how we have created things in pairs. And through this creation of things in pairs, the continuity of existence, whether that be in the plant kingdom or whether that be in the animal kingdom, with Quran in a very principled fashion just points out to and contemplate in that. Or for example, you find, one would say that the question of even we are the one who creates the prints of your fingers, for instance, which are different, which in the modern way they say that, the technology of the fingerprints are different to each individual, for instance. Or for instance, even in the Ahlulbayt, we tend to find, like in doing the dua of s.a.w.s, there's a phrase which says that, oh God, you are the one who even know the weight of light. I mean, the weight of light, which was a new concept, and today there's a discovery of that. And as a matter of fact, I was talking about one of the brother who is working on physics. He's doing a PhD on physics, probably might have finished it by now. His theory or his thesis was to look at that the whole universe is going in a direction. There's a direction in terms of this expansion of the universe. In what direction is it really expanding? Is it going in one direction, as we all pray towards one direction, which is God? So it's things like that you find, like the elements and the verses, which vaguely kind of point out to, and we could relate these modern discoveries towards these verses as they say that, oh, mashallah. But we can't say that, yes, it is it, because it's much higher than that. It's much more detailed and deep than that, what we think of. That is why we find exegests, such as, for instance, we find one of the greatest exegests, Tabatabai, very contemporary one. He says that he wrote a tafsir about 20 volumes of the Quran, not a modern sort of scientific tafsir, but the point I want to make here is that he says that every year it is required that there be new interpretation of the verses of the Quran on the basis of the research that have been done, and on the basis of the progress that has already been carried out in other fields, and one really investigate in that fashion. And it is really time that, and we are seeing that, alhamdulillah, that a very sincere approach being given to the Quran by the modern world, by the modern scientists. We haven't seen that they have done that. I mean, there's translation which doesn't really relay a proper message. As such, people have tried it, but a sincere look what the Quran is really saying and talking about. And if one really does that, then obviously one would be amazed at how much it will help mankind to unveil many realities. As the Quran clearly says that, if you are God conscious, and then I will open up, this earth to you, and I will open up the heavens to you. So when we want to advance in space, and if we have that element of faith, and imagine how far we would have gone by now. I mean, so much is so much energy, so much finances is behind these modern research and technology, and one gets busy, with all of that. Not only in one specific place, such as in NASA or in England, but it's everywhere. In every university you find that everyone is really struggling and striving hard. But that element, as they are missing, is just going into vicious circle. But if that element of taqwa, if that element of piety, of belief comes into that, obviously they would have found cure for cancer by now. Because God says that before He creates any diseases, He places its cure in this world. It's out there. I mean, so much of land, so much of different roots and leaves. How the shamans, the native Indians, how they, use different herbs and whatnot to cure things, and we hear about it, and people get cured even, right? Where are they getting this from? From this very earth, right? So that the element of that piety, the element of taqwa, which they are missing on, because of that, it's really getting them nowhere. It's becoming detrimental. On the other hand, when we look at the amount of damage that the modern science, how many sort of these, space waste is lying up, in the space, and if just it hits that, atmosphere, and it will just will be pulled by the earth. I mean, it's a massive sort of waste out there in the space. If one kind of Google it, this, the waste in the space, you would find, you would be like shocked to see that how much it is out there. Why it happened? I mean, do you think that the modern Muslim scientists would have developed such a thing that is detrimental to the atmosphere? Because a Muslim scientist believes in justice. He would never sort of advance towards technology that is detrimental to not only to human beings but to the environment. I mean, the Hiroshima or the Nagasaki, for example, the development of these bombs that we have seen and which have destroyed. Do you think a Muslim scientist would have done that? To conquer, to do zulm, to oppress. So modern science is really, not only in the same direction. The present modern science is not going in the direction where, it's really contributing towards Islam. What is Islam? Islam is justice. Islam is justice towards every creature walking on earth. So anything that is destroying the atmosphere, destroying the ozone layer, that's not Islamic at all. So the modern science that we have today is really going in opposite direction. So it really requires that of you youngsters to really investigate and look into that in whatever field you are, what would be the Islamic approach? You're in pharmacy, maybe what would be that? What the Ahlulbayt have said in relation to utilization of these, the herbs and whatnot. Can we find that? And alhamdulillah, we see that there's like a slight sort of investigation been going on in certain universities, combining homeopathic and the Ayurveda and this and that and the other. And all of these sciences are indeed the sacred sciences. You might even find in Hinduism, for instance, it's not that case. The God of Hindu, everyone's God is the same, right? So therefore, I really wanted to give in principle, or the message was that, we might take things as they appear to be, and as what they are supposed to be doing, which is dictated by their creators or by their inventors. But in reality, are they really doing that job? And when I'm carrying that out, or when I'm entertaining myself with it, am I getting closer to God or far away from God? That is something that we really need to do. Of course, inshallah, probably in the discussion of question and answer, we can talk about the theory of evolution and how the creation of Earth, how old the Earth is, the creation of Adam, which is very recent compared to what the scientists talk about, and how this puzzle, the dinosaurs and all that, and how this puzzle is really resolved, and what is really the Islamic sort of approach and the answers that one would have together, inshallah. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillah. Yes, we are open the floor for the question and answer.
Could you tell us some incidents when the Prophet demonstrated his scientific prowess?
Right. In scientific, in that sense of the word, not in the modern sense, the scientific.
If we could make it more contextual.
Yes. If you look at it, for instance, when it comes to scientific as in doctor, if you want to look at it from that angle, they say that they had a Jewish doctor in the neighborhood, in the vicinity where the Prophet was, and apparently after the arrival of the Prophet, he had to close down his store, and he was quite shocked that why is this happening, and he inquired who and why. Then they all said that the Prophet have given us specific dietary, so to speak, how one should eat, and when one should eat, and what, which is really helping the Muslim society not becoming sick, so they don't really need doctor as such. One specific thing, such as always leave your plate, or leave stop eating when you still have space in your sort of belly, for instance. So you have this element where, but specifically where Prophet taking a particular name of a medicine, for instance, which in the modern sense we might not find. However, Prophet mentioning such as those Ayurvedic or those herbs, the names of those herbs, yes, we do find, like cinnamon, like Prophet pointing out to the cure of honey and how it should be used and when it should be used. Basic things we tend to find that those names we tend to find Prophet have given, and it's been recorded.
In the Quran, when Allah created creates Adam, the angels tell that they have seen bloodshed.
Yes.
So they question Allah about the bloodshed. Now, before Adam, what was there? Because in Surah 2, verse number 30, the angel said that though is your representative, is going to create bloodshed and fitna.
Yes.
So before Adam, what about dinosaurs and all that stuff? The apes.
Right. Indeed, we say that, as we were mentioning, Quran doesn't deny, or Islam doesn't deny the theory of evolution. No, Quran, as a matter of fact, there was another verse where Quran says that we have created everything from the water, and which is once again pointing out to that how life started on earth. I mean, the beginning of life on earth, is through water. I mean, initially, if one kind of look at the discoveries or the story of earth, one would find that, that the Ice Age and the Siberian storm and all of that periods, which is millions of years ago, and eventually those small creatures that was created in the ocean, which had a vertebra, kind of started to swim eventually, and eventually this little creature started to come up the land, and it conquered the land. It was developed that limbs, and even the trees started to grow, and then you have this storm happening. Then these little creatures, everything was destroyed once again. Then you have a khalqan jadid, a new creation. Once again, a stronger creation, which laid eggs. It doesn't really require, life to be on earth, but within that eggshell you have that water there, which provided that nutrition to develop. And then it came out of the egg, and then you have that development of the mammals. All of that is nothing but a creation in different levels and stages in order to reach that Adam, which is insan. And it was done in a very beautiful way. I mean, if one really, there was a nice documentary on Discovery on the story of Earth, which talks about how old is our Earth. Millions and millions of years ago, which our Adam is very recent. And then it reaches to the point where it talks about the Homo sapiens and all that, right? So now, this is, what we are looking at here, creation of Adam, is a physical creation of God. What about Ajinna? What about the angels? They have been created way before this physical earth, this physical cosmos, where God says, I have created them. Iblis, he was created and he worshipped 6,000 years. He was raised to the level of angels that we don't see. They are here. It's not like, okay, there's this physical cosmos, they're outside there. No. Right? So, Ajinna, who are before the creation of these Neanderthal man, who they look like, how they look like, that is there as well, right? So eventually, when we look at the life of human beings on earth, yes, we could accept that, yes, it was really those Neanderthals, for instance, or Homo sapiens, as we said. Neanderthals were there, now it's a Homo sapiens. Now these Neanderthals, what happened to them? It's not like, Adam came from there, sort of, Adam is the great-grandson, the Homo sapiens are the grandsons of Neanderthal. No, there's a question of where you talk about the Ice Age, everything was destroyed, then everything was gradually created again. So these Neanderthal perhaps might have been destroyed completely, and Adam was created after that. And indeed, as the brother pointed out in Surah Baqarah, and the angels saw that they are creating corruption on earth. Yes, these Neanderthal were wild beings, they were very wild. They might be killing people, they might be doing stuff that is against, spilling blood in order to eat and drink and live. And they walked on two legs. And the angels said, the angels compared that his Adam is also like that. What do you want to do? Right? But Allah said that I know what you not know. I have taught him something, right? So what I'm now going back on to answer his question specifically, with all of this sort of discussion which we had, is that yes, Adam was created which we call him to be the first Homo sapien on Earth, they were human-like creatures living, which traditions talks about Nas and Nisnas and all that. They were human-like, and some of the exegetes also mention that the children of Adam got married to them, because they can't marry brother and sister in Islam, is not allowed, and some say that okay, they got married to the previous Adam that they lived on Earth, right? So, with all that in mind, the Homo sapiens, which is our sort of Adam, the first created, not necessarily that he be the grandson of Neanderthals, or it could be a new creation where Quran says لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا لَآدَمَ or لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا فَصَوَّرْنَاهُ, we created and we give them a form, and we said in Surah Araf, and we said that to Malaika to prostrate. I hope that kind of answers the question. There's always sort of like a very ambiguous space, vacuum in the modern science that is left in relation to the life on Earth, how it started. As this was trying to point out, there were these creatures that living in the sea, and the ice age happened, and they all died, and they become the oil that we use today in the Middle East, because it was those millions and millions of years ago, these fishes or creatures that were there, their sort of residue or their leftover is really oil. And it talked about those asteroids that hit the Earth and created that fire, and there were these plants on Earth, and they were living before sort of life came from water to Earth. There were plants, and it got burnt. Siberian or something storm used to call about it, and then this charcoal that we use today, it got deposited in the earth, and then today that is what we are using. Fine, well and good, very good. But the point is that you are talking about a complete destruction, and then you're talking about new creation again. The link is not there. There's no link to support Lucy, the ape that walked on leg, with the Homo sapien. They say that it might have developed that way. It's assuming it. Like we said, there's a lot of assumption there, right? There's no proper link. I could say that I could show a picture. I could say this is my son. I could say yes, there's a link, a proper link there. But when it comes to that, there's a lot of assumption there, And in relation to Jannah, for example, if one wants to, the Jannah of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, is not like the heaven that one would enter after one dies. It was on this very earth, a place that was, the specification that was given, is on this earth, the life and the way they were living. And this was the very place, this was the very earth where the jinn was living at the same time, the jinnah were living, or Iblis was living. It's not like a story, the Israeliyat, we tend to call them, from the Old Testament or from the biblical traditions that Iblis came in the form of a snake or something like that, deviated. So it's really very beautiful in terms of the scientific discovery that we see about the story of Earth, about how human beings come about. We don't deny that at all. We accept that. Any more questions?
Mansad, you said the story of evolution right now is mainly in reference to the way animals have evolved. But I thought the creation of Hazrat Adam in itself, is that not a rejection of human evolution?
What is evolution? I mean, it's development from, stage by stage development of existence, if you want to call of a creature, right? And this is in every field, whether that be in human beings or for instance, in animals or in plants, and it adapts. It's more or less a survival of the fittest, basically, right? It boils down to that. So when we are saying that it's development, gradual development, it's a process in order for that creature to fit into the environment and the atmosphere that it is living in. So every time God is developing and creating that sort of creature that will fit into that atmosphere and environment. So that's what Islamic take would be on. Now this was the sort of environment in which it required for man, for that creature to develop those limbs. He created it. And it lasted for a minute and it died down. And then it created the next creature, or the next sort of creature that was created. It lasted for a day. The limbs were developed more. So it's like gradual process of creating it. And why is that? I mean, obviously, God talks about creating in stages. That's how it is. However, if God wants, it is kun fayakun, no doubt about it. But this is the sunnah, and this is how it is. When the sun will rise, the day will come. Everything can't be, like that. This is the process that has to go through, and one cannot deny that. And denying that is absurd.
We've seen the discovery of stars in the last 30 odd years. We have Stephen Hawking, etc. Does the Quran say anything about stars and black holes or anything around that concept?
Like how the brother recited in the very beginning of the session, the verses in relation to the stars and the moon and the sun, which specifically, once again, Quran points out to that we have created them, and specifically you might find scientists, like for instance, I'm not too sure, Harun Yahya have done a sort of show or a talk on specifically pointed out to the discoveries of new black holes and how one is transformed to another level. No, I personally haven't really seen where it would be specifically mentioned about black holes and all that. Stars and how they are, places of contemplation, places where one should be amazed at the creation, and like comets which have a tail, a star having a tail, an-najmu as-saqib, which is seen and at the same time you tend to find that spiritual interpretation of those. For instance, you say that you would find tradition saying that burning star is really a being that wants to transfer the physical realm towards the heaven and gets burned. It cannot transfer it, and then you see it. You always have this spiritual aspect of this physical creation. As the jinns had the power to intervene into the heaven and see the future of mankind. And now after the coming of the Prophet, the last Prophet, all the heavens were closed. Even till the time of Isa, the heavens were open till the 4th level, because Isa is on the 4th level. To that level, the jinns would penetrate. But after the coming of the Prophet, the whole thing was closed, for the jinns, and they cannot penetrate. Now you're talking about comets. For instance, you would find all of a sudden, okay, that is that interpretation. They tend to say that. But now physically, when we are discovering it as a physical aspect, then we say, oh, these are stories. What are they trying to say? But I would be a bit reluctant with that. Okay, we are just seeing the physical aspect of it. Maybe it is something that we don't know, on a completely on a different level. Like for instance, people who live and walk on this earth, they might be physically living here, but at the same time they are in that, in that realm of barzakh, the purgatory Jannah. They are already there. They are walking here. They're physically here. Physically, when they examine me, it's blood flowing here and everything, and I have you have eyes and you're breathing. I could feel that, but you're not here. But you are in heaven already because of the level of spirituality that you are at, right? So you have that aspect as well, where traditions, like for example, you would find, the hadith where it says one who recites Quran in their house, their houses appear like stars, to the creatures living in the heaven, to the angels living in the heaven. So how we are seeing these stars as shining, illuminating, it's been symbolized as the houses that are reciting Quran, their houses will be having, will appear like stars to them. But so you have that aspect. You have that physical sort of classification, such as that the mass of it, the mass of it, the materiality of it, how big and huge and what it is and what it can do, what it could bring about, in terms of the azab falling down, from the heaven as asteroids, for instance. But at the same time, you have that spiritual or the subtle interpretation of these signs as well.
What about we have heard, small traditions in our mosques where Imam Sadiq, peace be upon him, they had established the university, or Imam al-Rida. So
yes, we tend to find, for instance, specification like the hospitals that we see. The first hospital that was established in the fashion that we have today was by Muslims, in a fashion of wards and sort of lecture rooms. The university, for instance, that we see once again, we find that during the 4th century, we tend to see Hijrah, where we tend to see the 6th Shia Imam. He was the one who had about 5,000 sort of students studying under him, and the specification of ulum, where we have today, specifically specialization in theology. He trained scholars only in theology, and these scholars might not be good in astronomy. Another scholar, Jabir, he's expert in mathematics, but he might not be good in, for example, in ilahiyat, in theology. So the specification that we see within the Islamic sort of ummah, that we find it happen through and by the 6th Imam, and the amount of freedom being provided to the freedom of expression within deen, within religion, we find that it's a very rich period where the Imam have allowed people even rejecting God and debating with the 6th Imam. As we mentioned earlier, there was an incident where there was a man, apparently he was discussing with his students in the mosque of the Prophet, pointing out to the shrine of the Prophet that this man was a great man, very humble, very ethical, very good in his moral. But the message that he brought, the Quran, talks about God, I don't believe in it. And he was giving proofs. And there was Mufazzal, who was one of the companion and friend of the 6th Shia Imam. He was sitting there and he overheard. He got really upset. And he went there and he reacted. And he rejected what you're saying. And this man said, hold on, who are you? He said, I'm the friend of Sadiq. He said, Sadiq never behaved in this fashion the way you are behaving with me. He allows me. He allows me to debate. He discusses. He brings philosophy. He brings logic. He brings his proofs. But you are as if, jumping into conclusion with me. If you want to debate in the fashion of Sadiq, well and good, come and do it. Then this Mufazzal, he goes back to the house of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and here he was very sad. He was, grim. And then Imam inquired what happened. And then finally he says that this is what happened. And then here Imam Sadiq says, okay, from tomorrow you come to me. In 6 days he, influxed, he visited the Imam, and they came up with a treaty called Tawheedul Mufaddal, which is in Arabic, which is a very good treaty, which talks about the creation from Imam Sadiq's point of view. The creation of the palm and the lines of the palm and how it is and what happened and how it was created. Specifically pointed out to the verses where it talks about the development of a fetus, which there was no scan or anything at that time, but on the basis of how Quran is saying how it is a lump of flesh and how the bones develop from it and all that. I mean, Quran is not a scientific book, but it's talking about all of these things, which we see it, in terms of even the fingers and the fingertips and the fingerprints, and today, for instance, in the modern science, we tend to see that even when you scan it, you have those fingertips and being developed, the fingerprints being developed. So you find that, I mean, if they would have come and talked about the Prophet or the Imams or the scholars of that time, the companions, if they would have mentioned things about, in the modern sense, it would have made no sense to the people. It would have made no sense to them what they are talking about. And that is why we find, for example, first Imam saying that there's so much knowledge hidden here, to Kumail, that I cannot speak about it, I cannot talk about it. And that is why I go to the well and I speak in the well, to let out. Ali knows the paths of the heaven more than the paths of the earth. So we find that, in relation to the Imams and the Prophet and the people of insight, people who are closer to the closer companions to the Imams and the Prophet. Because see, modern science is empirical, meaning that it's experimental based, is purely like, as we were talking about, physicality. But when it comes to the contribution of the Prophet, when it comes to the contribution of the companions and the Imam, that is purely spiritual based. However, the changes takes place in the physical form. You have that famous story of the 8th Imam, where there was a deer that the hunter was behind in order to kill that deer. That deer took refuge as Imam was in that jungle, and speaks to the Imam the language of animals, what it is. Even today you need these specific instruments to really figure out what they are saying. But there was this Imam who spoke, Prophet Sulaiman, who spoke, who understood the language of birds, who understood the language of creatures. How did he do that? Was there something specific, like an instrument? It's purely spiritual. You see what I mean? Then he picks up the sand and he gives it to this hunter. Don't kill this animal, because the animal have spoken to me and said that she has to feed her little ones who are in the jungle, and you are after money. In order to kill this, here's sand. He gives the sand changes to gold. That's what alchemy is. Changing of the sciences from sand to gold, right? So therefore you have that aspect where we see the Imams, the companions, the Prophet really addressing, but at the same time not to forget that they have paid attention to the structure or the principles that is laid within this physical realm. Medicine, yes. Utilization of it, yes. They promoted that. They themselves have used it. Not that it's purely that. You see what I mean? This is striking that balance. We had no questions from sister side. Maybe it was too boring for them. They just really want to go. Yeah. Any questions?
Okay, you got one.
We have.
Okay.
I'd say, you just said before, I'm sorry, I didn't catch on, but you said that for every disease, as long as there's also a cure for it. Where did you get that?
It's in the Quran where Allah says, I place the cure and then sort of I send the azab. I specifically need to find out. Inshallah, I will give the verse to brother, and maybe he can kind of pass on to you.
Okay, go on. Last question here.
Yes.
Sorry, just going back to my previous question, I don't think I asked clearly enough. To me, my understanding of evolution, according to like Darwin's theory, is once upon a time we were monkeys, and as the time went on, it evolved into a human.
Right.
What you previously said in your answer, that sounds more to me like what my understanding of adaptation is. Now, I'm not saying that we're the same as when Hazrat Adam was created, for instance, because when you see the graves of Habil and Qabil, they're a lot bigger than what we understand for humans to be. So obviously along the line there's been some sort of adaptation, but to me, my question is, in between Hazrat Adam and us, was there any signs of monkeys becoming humans or anything like that? Because that's my understanding of evolution.
Right. No. There seems to be no. Like I'm saying that my take on evolution is that it's a gradual development. Yes, monkeys, but they adapted to the newer environment, but they couldn't survive, and they faded away. Where these monkeys were created from, they were mammals. And these mammals, how they developed, they were completely destroyed, and then they were created again. It's always a new.
But was it the same? Because they were destroyed,
in terms of
a new thing created. So
yes, it's like, for instance, you have this every 5 years you have a new car, or every year, I don't know, now probably they might have every year, new car coming, in the market. So now it has the same specifics, as a structure, tires and wheels, but obviously there's newer things that is required or needed, such as, to the environment. But it's new completely. It's not the same car that has changed and developed. There's a new production altogether. So when Allah is talking about Adam and I created him, it's a new production. Not that it developed and monkey becomes, all of a sudden after it reaches to a stage, now he has become Adam now. So it's, when we look at the verses of the Quran, it says that I created, it's a new creation. And then I breathe into it my spirit. I think it's namaz time as well. Is it?
Yeah, okay. On behalf of the Ahlulbayt Society, I'd like to thank Shaikh Mirza for taking his time out and coming to Aston and giving us the inspirational lecture. It was very informative, so thank you very much. Can we have a loud salawat, please? Okay, so this event, inshallah, in a couple of days' time will be uploaded onto Facebook and YouTube. And if you also missed other events, you can catch up on the episodes on YouTube on the channel. And next week, inshallah, will be Ashura Awareness Week, and next Wednesday, the event will be taking place in the Guild. We're going to have a talk by a lecturer who's going to be called, and there's also going to be an exhibition. So it's basically just like a little tour around the Guild, and inshallah, further information will be texted to you or will be uploaded onto Facebook. Refreshments will be available to be served to you shortly, and inshallah we'll try to finish ASAP, it's namaz time and everything. So can we have a loud salawat to finish, please?
As a reading, I would like to request if you could look at s.a.w.s Nasr, Young Muslim Guide to the Modern World. There's a book called Young Muslim Guide to the Modern World. That's a good book. And other books by Nasr on Islamic civilization. That's a good book as well. So in order to follow this theme which we discussed today about modern science, comparing modern science with the Islamic science and how Islamic science would be.
Thank you very much. Okay, can we have just one more loud salawat to finish the event?